Hi, I'm Blythe Brumleve, founder of GuysGirl Media, and I am an outlier.
Hey everybody, welcome to Outlier on Air, the podcast where we interview founders, disruptors, and mavens. As always, I'm your host, Ever Gonzalez. On today's episode, we have Blythe Brumleve. She is the founder of GuysGirl Media. Blythe, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you on the show for a lot of different reasons. We kind of have a similar background in logistics and now media, and I am looking forward to getting to know you, introducing you to our audience, and then just kind of getting into the good, the bad, and the ugly of your entrepreneurial journey. It's going to be a lot of fun. So again, thank you for being on.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk with other like-minded people.
Awesome. Let's do this. So to kind of paint the picture for our audience, when you are at a conference or at a party or wherever you are, how do you introduce yourself, right? I mean, you have a lot of things going on that we're going to talk about here on the show, but right at that first 15 minutes or 15 seconds, what do you say? How do you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Blythe Brumleve, and I am a blogger, broadcaster, and the owner of GuysGirl Media.
Nice and easy.
Perfect. And hopefully people understand it as soon as I say those key phrases. If you say something like web developer or right. SEO specialist or something, people sometimes get a little confused.
But no, this makes perfect sense. So now I want to talk about what you're doing now and then kind of work our way backwards as to what got you to this point. But right now, full-time, you're working on GuysGirl Media. Tell us about it.
Sure. It started out 8 years ago as a sports and entertainment blog, and my sort of day-to-day life is I only recently went full-time with GuysGirl Media. It's about 3 months in, but day-to-day life is I blog and I broadcast each and every week, and sometimes multiple times per week, and then I also handle sales-oriented goals for web design for my clients.
So now this was a side hustle for a lot of years, right? When did you, 2009, 2010?
2009 is when I got started, and it was simply, I think naively, I thought back in the early ages of the internet, I could just start a blog, and a few months later, or maybe a couple years later, someone will offer me millions and just buy it off my hands. And that didn't quite work out as planned. But luckily it gave me a lot of resources and a lot of tools and insight to be able to parlay that into other gigs. So I work in radio and TV as well, and I can safely say that I wouldn't have either of those opportunities without blogging.
Yeah, good. I want to get into exactly what you're doing there with all these different little side projects that you're doing. But in 2009, you had, as far as we can tell, no real experience in media or in blogging type of stuff. I mean, your full-time job back then was, I guess they were kind of grooming you a little bit, but was not related to this, was it?
No, not at all. I was actually a cart girl. For those who aren't familiar with, golf courses and things like that, I was sort of like a waitress on a golf course. So I was working in that medium for a while, and it was when I made the career change to go into sort of an admin executive assistant role around 2008. That's when I knew that I wanted to launch GuysGirl and I wanted to launch my business. And so I was fortunate enough to work at a logistics company that wanted to finance my future learning. And so they set me up with dedicated classes here in town in Jacksonville for web design, for different applications like Microsoft and Adobe. And then they also fronted the money for me to be able to go to different conferences in Boston and Charleston, Tampa, Nashville, all of these different places to learn the new media at the time, which was social media.
Perfect scenario, right? You're learning all these cool things while you're getting paid to do it.
Exactly. It was quite nice, I do have to say.
How long were you there?
I was there for close to 5 years, and then the company actually abruptly closed down. I was at a dentist appointment, and I got a text that said we were out of business.
Oh, shoot. No heads up, huh?
Yeah, it was very, very sudden. It was very tragic, and it was right before the holidays too. So it was luckily a lot of us got a severance package, so it helped us out through the holidays. But it really took a few months of sort of self-discovery of what am I going to do? I just had the perfect sort of scenario where I'm getting paid to train, and I'm learning all of this valuable experience, and how do I? And I was using that experience towards the growth of GuysGirl as well. So I was able to use it from a B2B perspective and a B2C. So it was very challenging for a few months there.
A lot of our listeners that are listening to the story right now can relate, right? We've had, for the most part, full-time jobs or corporate jobs, and had something on the side, and then it always comes to that moment: do I stay or do I go and take the leap? Or like you lose the job. Easily you could have said, well, I'm going to go get another corporate job or another safe job. What was that thought process when you were like, well, I'm at this point, I'm just going to take a leap, right? The easy thing for you would have been, I'll go find another company to pay me. Why this? Why now at that moment?
Well, I didn't actually take the leap for GuysGirl at that point in time. It was a few months later that I got a job with a local magazine. So I started working with a local magazine for a little while. I was still working on my side hustle, but I had this. And looking back on it, I know it was fear, because it definitely was fear up until the point of a few months ago before I full-time took the leap.
Okay.
So it was this idea that, nobody's going to pay me for my expertise yet. I'm not as qualified as these other people. I'm not as qualified as an agency. And what I really didn't understand at the time but that was also my pluses, and that was also the benefit to working with me, is that you didn't have those those big agency prices, or a lot of the hoops that you have to jump through. So I didn't take that approach until later on in my career. But after the company closed, I went and worked for a couple of other different media entities, and the experience that I learned from those different companies is I learned not only to create valuable content that readers and visitors want to engage with, but also how to monetize that content, and not in a way that's spammy, or a way that's going to turn off your audience. Because I think a lot of media companies make that mistake today, is that they're so eager to monetize their efforts that they end up turning off their audience, and their audience, it never comes back and never builds as they envision. So I've always put a very high priority on creating content first, and then the audience will follow whatever resonates with them the most. So taking those different opportunities at a radio station here in town, a magazine here in town, it really allowed me I guess I would say a variety of ways to monetize media in today's digital world.
Well, let's talk about that for a sec, right? It feels like there are so many media companies out there. I feel like we're all supposed to be our own, at least, media company, right? With the content that we put out and the things that we put out there. And that's the difficult part. You brought it up. How do we monetize it, right? It could be throw out as much as you can and see what sticks, or you can be a little bit more strategic. What do you recommend for a lot of our listeners are kind of in that same boat right now?
I would say consistency is the most important thing. If your audience, even if you're only writing once a week or once a month, if your audience knows when a new piece is going to come out, then they'll be more obliged to subscribe and engage with your platform. But monetizing it is definitely a different approach. I would highly suggest that you pick a variety of ways to monetize, because what you find is that if somebody dedicates, a lot of media companies are finding out now that if they dedicated all of their revenue streams into ads that appear on your website. And now with the rise of ad blockers and the greater emphasis on the reader experience, a lot of these different websites are suffering from people who don't want to engage with their brand because they have spammy ads on their site, or you have to whitelist their sites in order to visit. And that's just not a friendly user experience. And I think that a lot of brands, they try to jump to monetizing too soon, and they don't give their audience that chance to sort of breathe and engage with their content first. So I would stress highly on creating that content first and being honest and authentic. Even if you are pitching a product or if you're reviewing a product, if you're honest and authentic with your audience, then they'll respect you for that, and they'll appreciate your opinion on whatever you're offering, whether it's on a product review, a conference review, or if you saw the latest movie like a Wonder Woman. Everybody was raving about, maybe you didn't like it, and maybe you want to be honest with your audience. Mm-hmm. I would highly suggest being honest and authentic and being consistent.
Wait, breaking news.
And then the revenue will follow.
Breaking news here. Are you saying you did not like Wonder Woman? What?
I actually did like
Okay, good. I was going to have to cut this short here. If you would have said no, I would. Okay, we gotta go.
No. I'm a big Wonder Woman fan, so I loved it.
Good. It was fantastic. So now, in my mind, I'm thinking, when I think about media companies or media in general at this day and age now, I think about the media companies that are a platform, right? Like Facebook and some of these other companies like that. And then I think about media personalities as well. Where are you? You're obviously a media personality. Are you trying to build a media platform as well? Or are you doing both? How does it work? What's the goal?
It's a little bit of both, but it's more or less promoting myself as someone who's been through the grind, who knows how to I know what works for certain audiences, and I know what doesn't. So that's really where my career has sort of expanded into is, I'm not covering news like other websites are mm-hmm. covering, breaking news where they take a tweet and they write a couple sentences and they post an article, and that, that counts as a news article. That's not me. I focus more on the long form of content, more video based. Most of my content that I put out now is all video first, because I feel like there's more of an interaction. There's more of an intimacy when you're looking directly into the camera versus, like a formal news setup desk. So it's really transitioned just in the past year of how media is consumed, especially with the recent election and how everybody is so on, polar opposite mm-hmm. sides. But it's really changing. It's a constantly changing environment. So I would say I'm definitely a media brand first, but then secondly, it's using my experience over the past decade of how to help other people who want to either grow their media brand or grow their business with sales focus.
As we were preparing for this interview, right, we do our research, we look at you and the stuff that you've put out there, and you have been consistently putting out good content for a while now, right? How much more of that do you have in you, and like how much does it take? It's difficult. I mean, I don't care if it's a podcast or an article or a video. It can be draining. What do you do to keep excited about it day in and day out, and how much longer do you have?
I would say, I definitely, I'm the type that always has an opinion, so I feel like I'll have an opinion on something until the day I die. So that's like an endless amounts of information. But I will say that there was a big pivot career-wise for myself when I went from a news focus of a website to evergreen content. Mm-hmm. That was a big shift for me, because you have to change your strategy on how you find stories that you're going to write about, how the frequency in which you're going to cover them. That when I first got started in 2009, you could blog about a news item that was just breaking, and you could get a tremendous amount of traffic and traction from it. Nowadays, there's so many media companies, and they scour the search engines and they scour social media networks, and it's an article before you can even blink. And so for me, it was incredibly challenging, because at the time I had about a half a dozen writers, and we just couldn't keep up. And so I said, we got to change something here. It's just not working anymore, this current format. Otherwise, we're going to have to expand and get a staff of 50 writers, and that just doesn't work on the web anymore. But nowadays, I focus more on the evergreen content, and I feel like if you are honest and you're authentic with the pieces that you're coming out with, then that is the different. That's sort of the different strategy that I'm taking company-wise. It's less writers, but more focused on the long-form content and content that people are going to get a value from for years to come, not necessarily. This is a great example that I always sort of go back to, is I spent about 30 hours on a research piece for GuysGirl, and I was so proud of it. It was and when you hit publish and then you don't get the reaction that you thought you were going to get, it's really disheartening. And I remember the following day I posted like a quick video of cats with lightsabers, and it tripled the traffic of the report that I spent nearly 30 hours on. I was so frustrated, but that's the age of the internet.
You got to do what you got to do, though, right? I mean, it's amazing how you're right. It would be so easy if we just kind of put out a lot of that trash that we see on a regular basis, this clickbait stuff and these headlines and stuff with no real substance behind it. 30 hours is a long time. It's what have you learned from it? I mean, what should we do, right? Our listeners that are trying to figure this out, is it somewhere in between? Is it putting out content that's going to take us 30 hours or so, or I mean, with your experience, obviously, what do you recommend?
I would recommend somewhere in between. I mean, don't put 30 hours into something unless you can pull a bunch of different segments from it. And that's really what I strive to do now. I said earlier that all of my content starts with video now, and what I'll do, a good strategy that I'll put out there is, like a video that I made just recently was 5 mistakes that bloggers and broadcasters make online. Well, you can take those 5 mistakes and you can split them up into 5 different segments. And I've taken one of those segments where I advise bloggers not to steal from photographers. That should be common sense knowledge. It wasn't to me when I first got started, but maybe for somebody else who is just getting started, it could be informational to them. So what I'll do is I'll take that little snippet and turn that into its own blog post, and then that audio turns into its own podcast, and then you can piggyback off of those different, what I like to call, content trees. And so you want to, it's almost like the Christmas tree effect when you're in school, where you're doing like the mind maps of all the different ideas. So you take one idea and you see how you can split it off into several different ideas, especially if it's resonating with your audience. If your audience really likes that piece of content, how can you expand on that and just rinse and repeat? A lot of the web is simply just throwing something up against the wall, and if your audience likes it, then you keep doing more of it.
What's the hardest part of your job right now, of what you do?
Oh, available time.
Yeah.
That's my biggest struggle. I do, I listen to all the productivity tips and I'm a Post-it hound, and I have a Post-it for every single day of the week. I write my Post-its the night before of what I'm going to do. And I like the psychological benefit of crossing things off of the Post-it, but I can't help but feel a little defeated when I reach it's the end of the day and I still have several things left on the to-do list. So that's probably my biggest challenge right now. It has helped recently where I focus on the biggest priority item of the day, and also I try not to jump into email until after that most important project is completed, because I think we all know with email that it can literally take up your entire day.
Sure. I think we can all feel your pain a little bit, right? Working at a corporate job, it has obviously its pros and cons, right? The pros, steady paycheck. When you clock out, you really clock out for the most part. Right now, right, the lines are blurry when we're entrepreneurs, when it's your own baby, when you're doing this. Are you able to kind of disconnect a little bit and just focus on you, or is this you 24/7?
It's you. Well, I say 24/7 with a grain of salt, because I'm a big family person. So I will, if there's something, going on, Sunday dinners are a big thing here in the South. If I miss a Sunday dinner, then I'm going to hear about it for a while. So that's something that I try to prioritize family time. But I do think it's really important to listen to your body. A good example is that I had over the week is last week, I think I worked nearly 80 hours.
Whoa.
And here I am at 1 a.m. on technically Sunday morning, but really Saturday night. And I'm just thinking to myself, I have so much to do. I feel like my to-do list grows instead of reduces. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go to the beach. I'm lucky enough to live close to the beach. So I said, I'm just going to go to the beach in the morning. I went to the beach in the morning, couple hours, swam, cleared my head a little bit, came back and knocked out the rest of the things that I was hoping to do the night before. So I think it's really listening to your body in order to understand when you need to take a break, and whether that's, taking a walk or going to the gym. The gym is also another big plus for me. You just have to have those. You have to force yourself to almost take those mental breaks.
That's right. Force yourself. It's very difficult sometimes, right? So it's good advice. Forcing yourself to do some of these things where you need to step away a little bit. It's going to keep you fresh and recharged, right?
Absolutely.
To go out there and attack it the next day. Good for you. Now, with all of the stuff that we're talking about, everything that you're doing, you're also doing is it a weekly radio show?
Yes, it's actually here in town. It's called Helmets and Heels. It was the first radio show in the country to be hosted by all women.
Nice.
So it's there was 4 of us at the time, but now there's 3 of us because one of the girls went off and she's a sideline reporter for the Marlins and the Panthers, and so she works for them now. So it's the 3 of us, but we host a weekly sports show on Tuesday nights from 7 to 9 p.m. and we talk about all the major sports. Since we're based out of Jacksonville, there's a lot of Jaguars coverage as well, NFL team here in town, and then the rest of it's all the major sports stories. So it's been a wild ride, and we launched a show 3 years ago. We're coming up on our 4th football season.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And just recently, a girlfriend of mine launched her own sports show in Kansas City. So now there's 2 sports shows as far as independently run that I know of across the country that are actually airing on a radio station.
And on top of that, right, which is great for Jacksonville and the area that you're there, but you also live stream it, right? I mean, I've seen a few of your episodes on Facebook live, I believe. Right? That's cool. What kind of response are you getting from outside of the area? Because you talk about a lot of different topics, not just the local sports teams.
Absolutely. And for me personally, I love more the national topics than sort of trying to force feed, some of the local stories here. I really find a great passion in talking about things that I'm passionate about. And I think you can tell in someone's voice if they're just not really feeling it. So adding the live stream as that extra element, that when we do get really impassioned or the debates get a little fiery, you can see those reactions on our face and you can see them live. But it's also cool because what happens when you listen to it on the radio is that you don't get the interaction of the things that are said and the planning and the conversations that happen during breaks. On the live stream, though, you get all of that information. So it's been a little bit of a trial and error for a little while, but I feel like we've been in a really good place for a couple months now with proper audio and video setup. It's about as good as it's going to get. We're a little limited, radio station wise.
Yeah.
But here in town, we've gotten a tremendous response because of the live streams, and I plan on expanding it, not removing it anytime soon.
Who's listening and watching the show? Women, men, a good mix?
I would say if it's on the radio, it's definitely more men, just because by nature, the demographics just skew towards male listeners for sports radio. But on the live stream, it's surprisingly a lot of females, and it's close to being 50%. But we're getting a lot of those people who don't listen to the radio at night, because I don't listen to the radio at night, and for a lot of people, they've known, especially family members, they've known that I've done this show before, but it wasn't until we started doing the live stream and they see it on Facebook that they're like, oh yeah, that show that Mike does, they actually watch.
So what is you're talking about sports, right? I mean, are you getting the kind of respect, I guess? I don't even know what other word to use, because now it's an all-female cast talking about sports-related items, right? Are you getting any pushback or anything negative coming out of that?
Not really. I think whenever you have an opinion online or on a radio show or some kind of platform, then you do sort of expect to get a lot of pushback. But I've been pretty lucky in that regard that I haven't gotten any, sort of creeps on social media or anything like that. And I I don't want to attribute it to, I know some other women who have, and they definitely, sort of get into a back and forth on social media with them. But I've had a ton of support. So it hasn't happened to me yet, but I anticipate that it probably will, because it's like what they say, if you don't have haters, you're not doing something right.
That's right. So what is all this going to look like in 3 years then? Right? When we have you back on the show, what are we going to be talking about in 3 years?
We are hopefully going to be talking about some platforms that I am building for people who work in sports media, because I think that what happens nowadays is that you have a lot of media members and they think that their resume is good enough. But like what we saw recently with ESPN, hundreds of people are getting laid off and they have no recourse. They don't have anywhere to turn to. And most of them didn't have a website. Most of them didn't have a place where all of their commentary, all of their experience that they've done over the years.
And very talented people too.
Exactly. And all they have is a basic resume. And I guess people look at resumes still. But to me, the first thing I do whenever I'm investigating someone is I go to their social media accounts or I go to their website. I want to see exactly what you're working on. I want to see a good synopsis of everything that you've done in your career and why I should potentially work with you. So right now what we're doing is we're creating a platform for people who work in sports and entrepreneurs, specifically women who want to amplify their voice. And so we'll either provide a platform for them, so if they have specifically just a podcast or just a vlog, then we can provide that home for them online, or we can build it for them, because I'm a big fan of people staying independent. If you're an independent media source, to me, it's as long as you are doing your due diligence and you're doing your research, then that's somebody that I would trust more so than somebody who works at a major news organization, who I might wonder if that they have some biases, or somebody's in their pocket or something along those lines, which you do have those problems with small time media members as well, but that's sort of a case by case basis.
I love it. I agree. Good for you. Now, when we talk about resumes and the things that you've done personally in the past and things like that, right? If we had to kind of bring it all back in, what's the number one reason for your success?
I would say probably social media.
Really?
It's really been the digital handshake for me for years. It was the way that I learned about an open editor-in-chief position here about it for a magazine here in town. It was the way that I was introduced to the radio station. It was the way that I was introduced to a variety of even just sports fans, female sports fans, which there was a time when I felt like I was completely alone. I was the only woman who really loved sports and gaming. But with the internet, you can really use social media to make those digital handshakes and then further that relationship in more of the real world atmosphere with phone calls and emails and introducing yourself at conferences and things like that. But social media has been a key player, despite what's sort of been going on since the election. It really, I have a tremendous amount of respect for people who can build an audience and a following on social media and do it the right way.
I like it. Everything has its pros and cons, and obviously you're taking advantage of social media and you're doing it the right way. And I like that you're doing what you love, right? You wake up every single day doing something you love. That's, I don't care how much money you're making. I don't care how much money, all that stuff. This kind of counts for a lot of happiness.
And I'll tell you, I've been freelancing now for 3 months full time since leaving the corporate world. And I guess I need to come up with a new phrase besides freelancing, because it kind of insinuates that I'm not working, even though I'm working more than ever in my life. But because I'm working more so than I ever have in my life, I'm less stressed out, and I'm more, I'm incredible that the happiness level and the satisfaction level has increased tremendously. I was, 4 months ago, I was still sitting in an office cubicle, and I was wondering what the heck I'm going to do with my career. I thought I should be further along by now. And I really, it was just one of those moments where you just got to look yourself in the mirror and say, you can do this. Stop being so scared. Make the leap. You've done everything you've needed to do for other companies. Now you need to do it for your own company.
No doubt that there are a lot of listeners that are nodding their heads in agreement. Yes, yes, yes. So good for you. You're doing it. You're doing it well, obviously, or else you wouldn't have had the success that you're having right now. So with that being said, for those that are listening that either are working a 9 to 5 and have a side hustle, or have recently jumped in full time into their own gig, what kind of advice do you have for them? What can they do right now to kind of get them to that next level overall?
I was listening to an episode of your podcast earlier today, and I heard I think her name was Bridget, that she mentioned the strength of small ties.
Yes.
And I was nodding my head in agreement that was it. That's been, whether you are introduced via social media or another connection, those small ties that you make here locally or even at different conferences, those have been pivotal in moving my business further along and in a more positive direction. And also being a great listener and listening to what your potential customer, what their problems are, because if they're having issues with that, then that's something that you could solve for them in the future, and that could be future business opportunities for yourself. And also just stay honest and authentic. I can't tell you how much that people, whenever they get to a certain job or a certain career change and they're offered a different position, or maybe they're offered a position that they've dreamed of and that they didn't take, or maybe they were fearful of taking that leap, take that leap. Be true to yourself, listen to your body, and don't let fear cripple you. Because I think that I want to say that I let fear cripple me for too long.
Take that leap. I love it. That's perfect, right? What else can you say? Take that leap. Don't let fear cripple you. That's fantastic advice.
Well, thanks. But that's really, I really have to say that I did that for years. And I was like, no, I'm not. If I just work 6 more months at this job, then it'll be easier. I'll have more money saved up, or, saving money before you make that leap is very important. I would highly stress that. But you'll either find an excuse or you'll find a way. And there's nothing that will motivate you more than that moment of, holy crap, where is my next check going to come from?
Agreed.
And once you have that mindset, and that it's like the hustle is brought out in you that you didn't even know existed.
And there's never going to be the perfect time, right? You're never going to have
Exactly.
the right amount in the bank or the perfect time to do this and that. You just got to do it.
Exactly. You have to trust in yourself and your work ethic. And hey, if it doesn't work, then you can, if you're not failing, you're not trying. Mm-hmm. And if plan A doesn't work, then that's why you have plan B, and that's why you have C, D, E, and F, and so on and so forth.
Perfect. So obviously you're the real deal, right? So for those that are listening to this episode that, I've heard the ups and downs, obviously the success that you've having, this great advice that you're giving. For those who want to connect with you, where can we find you online?
Sure, you can find me on damn near all the social media networks, both personal and business. I have all my business accounts are at GuysGirl. All of my personal accounts are at Blythe Brum. I try to make it my last name a little bit easier on people. And then I also have recently launched 2 months ago a company called Modern Logistics Marketing for those who work in the supply chain industry. So you can find at MLM Influence on Twitter or at just modernlogisticsmarketing.com.
Perfect. So Outliers, you can go to outliermagazine.co. That's outliermagazine.co. First of all, subscribe to the podcast, rate, review it, share with your friends. We have amazing guests just like this. We're going to have links to Blythe's website, to all of her social media accounts. Feel free to connect with her. Like I mentioned earlier, she's the real deal. Say hello, follow her, listen to her on Facebook, all that good stuff. Blythe, this has been amazing. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, for your words of wisdom, for the stories, and for the advice. We wish you much success. We're going to continue to follow you, and we're going to have you back in 3 years to kind of do it all over again.
Oh, likewise. I really appreciate you having me on. And like I said, I listened to your podcast earlier today, and it was an instant subscribe.
I love it. Thank you so much. And Outliers, we'll talk to you tomorrow.